Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Monday, February 3rd, National Carrot Cake Day. Carrots are orange, so I have an orange fact for you. Did you know that Spider-Man's original concept of a costume was not red and blue, but orange and purple? Two colors you don't really see in combination too much, especially in the hero version.
That's what they were going to use in the 60s?
In the 60s, I think one of them was thinking about using that. And I think Lee and there was a few creators. The main two who get credit are Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. But it was a lot of people's minds. I think they, at some point, say that they were influenced by spiders, as well as a character called The Spider, which was a comic in the 30s and 40s. And you can see that where he kind of uses spider-like abilities to jump on trains and stuff.
I know that the first time he came around was August 1962, and it even gave us other characters, like Kingpin's first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man number 50 in like July 10th of 1967.
Yeah, so when he first appeared, he was more of a sidekick character, and even though they didn't call him Spider-Boy, they didn't want to ostracize the team base. They wanted to be like, okay, he's still Spider-Man, he's his own leading guy. Yeah. He came around in like issue 15 of a previously canceled comic.
Amazing Fantasy.
Yes, and that's the name of the first episode here of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And so they knew that they were going to launch a separate thing with Spider-Man afterwards, even when he was showing up in the first comic.
I mean, he kind of broke ground, right? For being like the first teenage superhero, he can be responsible for things like the Blue Beetle and any other like teenage superhero you can really think about.
I guess, and there's been so many iterations of him. People have seen it, Spider-Man, from comics to the TV shows.
You can see 630 of them in Across the Spider-Verse.
And we'll talk a little bit about Across the Spider-Verse, but is that your favorite version of Spider-Man?
I like Spider-Man No Way Home probably the most.
Okay, so Tom Holland's.
Yes.
And then you mix it a little with the past, Tobey Maguire.
That's the main reason. Well, when I was growing up, Spider-Man 3 was my favorite film of all time. And then that kind of changed, but I think that No Way Home is still the best Marvel film, despite it coming out, I think, in the worst phase.
So it's fair to say, since the third one's your favorite, and that's probably the most cheesy out of the Raimi three, that you have no problem with the memes that came across.
The Bully Maguire memes.
Bully Maguire, the pizza time meme, the dancing meme. Yeah. What do you think the bigger meme is between the Spider-Man pointing the 60s like comic Spider-Man point, or Peter Parker dancing his emo dance?
I like the dancing meme, but obviously it's the pointing thing. They even did it in Across the Spider-Verse. Like and they did it with Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire too, right?
Okay. Yeah. So let's segue over to the show. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It came out on January 29th with 2 episodes on Disney Plus, created by Jeff Tremel, the same writer of one of the biggest children's shows out, Craig of the Creek. So this is targeted towards the younger base. It makes sense because they were originally going to title it Spider-Man Freshman Year. He's supposed to be 14 years old, and there's not a teen cast member in this whole entire production.
So how old is the main character, do you know? The guy who voices Spider-Man?
30?
He's 30?
I think so. Yeah, wow. He's 30. I think the biggest name on there, though, is the guy who plays Osborn, right?
Right.
He is Coleman Domingo.
I was about to say, I didn't have a problem with any of the voice actors, but I thought the best were Paul F. Tompkins. It was fun hearing him playing kind of the lab person. But Norman Osborn, he sounds even almost more threatening than William Dafoe.
It's funny you say he's threatening, because in this version of the show, which is supposed to be sort of like an extended what if production.
Yeah.
Originally, they were going to have Tom Holland be back and it was going to take place in the MCU, but they decided not to do that. And instead, they have this whole new idea where instead of his mentor being Tony Stark or even Doctor Strange to a certain point, they're just going to make it Norman Osborn. So Norman's supposed to be sort of a good guy, right?
It's an interesting premise. I think he's supposed to still be a bad guy, but I don't think it's going to be a Brightburn situation like where Superman ends up being evil. I think it's going to be like somehow Peter Parker learns to not trust Osborn, and I'm assuming the season finale is going to be them fighting each other, him in the Green Goblin costume.
Does Norman have a son in this universe? Is Harry around?
I don't think we've seen Harry yet.
Okay.
But I think he's probably going to be in the show.
It's like one of those things where you know that Daredevil is going to appear at some point. They've even talked about how Charlie Cox did his voicing for it back in 2022. So 3 years ago.
I think he did his voicing while he was like on set for She-Hulk.
Exactly. Yeah. And Vincent D'Onofrio is also coming back.
See, those were the two that I was really excited about. In fact, when I was doing research for one of the MCU shows, I think it might have even been She-Hulk, that's when I learned that this was coming out. So
you were hoping to see him in the first 2 episodes. He's not in the first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Again, the first 2 episodes
you barely get Doctor Strange.
Amazing Fantasy and the Parker Luck. The version of Stephen Strange that we see in the first episode when he fights the symbiote, right, that's not necessarily supposed to be the same Doctor Strange even from the MCU either.
He looks
right?
like, I said this at the time, he looks like Clark Gable.
He does. He looks like Clark Gable. For anybody who is listening who watches Clark Gable movies from the 50s or earlier.
I couldn't help but laugh during that scene because whenever they showed his face, I was always just like, it just seemed like,
it's the mustache.
It's
the mustache and the cheekbones. Yeah, this is the 12th television series on the MCU, and as you've been bragging all week, you're ready to name them all. So go ahead.
Okay, well, Daredevil, does Daredevil count? Like, are we talking about that?
No, I think that it has to be the one.
Okay, the ones afterwards. Okay, yes. So WandaVision, Loki. By the way, I haven't been bragging about it.
Yeah, I know.
Loki, She-Hulk. Oh, there were some other ones too.
Echo. Yeah, there's a few other ones.
There was Echo.
Agatha all along.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to. What if you're gonna have to help me out with
the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel. At this point, Daredevil's gonna be the next one, so I'll give you half credit for that.
Okay, yeah, Daredevil Born Again,
and then Ironheart after that. So yeah, the 12th series in, do you think that they've finally found their footing? I heard that What If Season 3 did not meet expectations, even to what the first 2 seasons had put out.
Right, and I think that they're going to be making the spin-off Marvel Zombies afterwards. I didn't keep up with What If. I had this as my most anticipated show of the year, and I don't think that it lived up to that expectation. That doesn't mean that I didn't like the show. There were definitely parts that I liked. The attention to detail. There's a lot of Easter eggs and references. I wasn't a huge fan of Aunt May's, so that's how it works. Call back to the Avengers. But for example, in one of the fight scenes, you see Zach Cherry's character. Not Zach Cherry, he doesn't voice the character, but you see his character, and there's just
who does Zach Cherry play in the original MCU?
He's the guy who tells Spider-Man to do a flip, and he's also in Shang-Chi when he's on the bus. And
okay, so he's popped up in several different ways. I don't know if this is where you want to start it, but I will tell you from just seeing the intro clip, like I both loved and hated it all at the same time, and I realized that partially I'm just showing my bias from how much I did. I wasn't like the biggest 90s cartoon fan or anything, but when it kicked on, I was like, they've taken it and they've like revolutionized it into 2025. And then you've got like the rapper come in, and suddenly it became a lot less fun to listen to.
That was one of my cons. I'm not a big fan of the rap song over the original Spider-Man.
But I like the original Spider-Man. I also liked how, because it was so long, I didn't like the length, but I liked how they kept on throwing in like shades of Batman Beyond, the way the animation was styled there. And then when they get back to the regular cel-shaded 3D animation, I don't know if I'm necessarily as big on that. I understand it looks like you're reading a comic.
Yeah, no, and I thought that was one of the things that was cool about it. It was sometimes a bit choppy, like unintentionally at times, but I actually liked the way that the whole show looked. I thought that it looked nice. It wasn't too distracting.
So in the first episode, Amazing Fantasy, run that down for me, because he only meets Norman Osborn at the very end.
Yeah,
of the
episode, it's a recreation of when Tony Stark meets him in Civil War, as we kind of talked about. But Peter Parker starts high school, but is banned by a mysterious spider from Doctor Strange's portal.
How'd you like that bite? Like it just the spider descends from another verse, and then it just falls on his back on the back of his neck. He's already shown that he's heroic, right? Because he has tried to stop the symbiote from killing. What's the name of the girl that he saves? One of his friends.
Nico, right? Yeah, Nico Monaru.
So he's just talking to her, and that's when the spider decides to bite him, and he faints.
Yeah. And I was glad that they got out of the way in the first 5 minutes. I find it funny because what the Tom Holland Spider-Mans did was they were like, we know you know the Uncle Ben story. We know you know that he gets bitten by a spider. This show decided to at least show you the bite here.
And it's post Uncle Ben dying, so he never gets to
we don't know if he even has an Uncle Ben. Maybe. because I mean, like for example,
That's
Tom
true.
Holland didn't. One thing I did pick up on is he sees Doctor Strange and he's like he doesn't know his name. So I was thinking to myself, the Avengers are probably in this universe not as well known as they are in others.
Tony Stark is, because they even mention Stark Industries when he goes to work at the energy thing. And so they both have two giant billionaires with Osborn and Stark trying to compete with each other over different things. But yeah, maybe Doctor Strange hasn't gotten his powers or just doesn't exist in this universe.
Yeah, but he befriends Nico Minoru, and I think that I'm not sure if I'm getting that last name right, but she's supposed to be, I think, a different superhero, right? She's part of like the Runaways.
Yeah, so yeah. The Runaways, the comic, I'm not sure about the television series that was a few years ago.
I was very sad because I learned today that apparently they were thinking about having teenage Jessica Jones be Peter Parker's like friend, and I would have liked to see that a lot more than this Nico
Especially if
person.
they kept the same voice as what's her face, because they could have kept her. Yeah,
Kristen Ritter.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, but yeah, after he stops a robbery, he returns home to find that that Aunt May, she's talking to Norman Osborn, and so he's offered an internship.
So suddenly it just became No Way Home. Because
Yep.
like Osborn talking to Aunt May again is a callback, and I thought that he just saw him at the end of the episode, but why is Osborn so interested in Peter?
Well, at first it's just because Peter seems to be like the smartest one. He's been trying to get into like kind of the technical side of things, and obviously Osborn has Oscorp. That's where he's offering Peter to work at.
Right.
We
So
even
it's a
see
little
him works in
unclear.
the lab.
It's
Yeah.
a little unclear so far. We also know that he's not just jumping in as his protege or his apprentice. He's literally in a crowd of like a very competitive field of other high school students trying to get ahead.
His lab mates are Asha, who's from Wakanda.
And this is in the second episode, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now. And then Amadeus and then Jian. And those three seem to be not only more confident and more cocky, but they seem to, at least from what it seemed like in the show, do their job a lot better than Peter does.
He's a little distracted with his spider abilities, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, and you see it throughout the show. He has to end up leaving class sometimes to use the restroom while he's actually trying to stop crime, or he ends up leaving his job here to stop Butane from burning down a wrong building.
Butane as in the compound, so he's an arsonist. That makes sense. People really like that fight scene from what the internet was showing. And then how does it compare to Invincible? Because Invincible also has a very strong high school dynamic.
Invincible's fight scenes, and I think just overall story.
Yeah, it gets darker, obviously.
It gets darker, but it's also just a lot better. I mean, here there's nothing.
Sorry to disagree, but like Invincible, the weakest part to me is always the high school part. And it sounds like maybe the strongest part here is Peter Parker being the everyman.
But then I've been mostly focusing on his powers, because you do get some of the high school just tropes in this show. For example, Lonnie Lincoln, he is a person who's the captain of the football team.
Yeah.
He becomes friends with Peter Parker, but really Lonnie Lincoln is actually dating Peter Parker's crush. So it's like and then there's a lot of scenes where Nico and Peter Parker are talking as well. So it does focus on the high school aspect. I think that's part of the weakest parts of the show.
Nico's not his crush, though, is she?
No, Nico is the person that is friends with him.
I know, but who is the crush is what I'm asking.
It's Pearl, and Pearl used to babysit Peter Parker when he was younger. Yeah, he had like a babysitter.
Like a little age difference there.
Well, it reminded me of the movie The Babysitter, because he's 11 and she was 14, and that's how they babysat.
Not how the Babysitter movie worked at all.
No, but the Babysitter focused on a kid who really shouldn't have a babysitter by that age. In fact, Nico makes fun of Peter Parker for having a babysitter at the age of 11.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Peter Parker has always had a crush on her, but she's dating the football captain. So it's kind of like a weird love triangle.
Mm-hmm. And the football captain is freshman as well?
No, I think he's a senior.
How many, when you were in high school, how many senior friends did you have in freshman year?
Not many.
I had a couple in band, but that was it.
It was funny too, because from the way that they introduced Lonnie, it seemed like he was going to be a villain. Because again, he's this incredibly popular character who decides to start a friendship with Peter Parker out of the blue. And so I thought to myself, okay, we're going to see the villainous twist at the end of the episode. But really, he just seems to be a good guy. We get more of his story, and he is helping out his family. We haven't seen him turn evil yet, so he may just be like a nice character in the end.
Yeah, why is the second episode called The Parker Luck?
I think it's supposed to be sarcastic, because by the end, Norman Osborn figures out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
But there's not like a potluck? that happens or something?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. I was just curious.
But yeah, no, Norman Osborn, that was probably the best line of the whole show, ends it with saying, "So you're Spider-Man," and he's filling this voice. And it was a little strange to me because I thought the whole entire point, I remember in Civil War, Tony Stark was able to figure out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man without us even really having to know about it. It was strange. I was wondering why Norman Osborn, he must have really just gone to Aunt May's apartment to give Peter the internship, when initially I thought that it was going to be like Norman knew that he was Spider-Man already. But in the second episode, it's treated like a twist when he figures out that he knows.
Okay, well, this is what the Wikipedia summary says. It says, later, Peter returns to Oscorp, where he is summoned to Norman's office. Norman then shows Peter security footage of the latter putting on the Spider-Man suit. So, that was
how he ended up figuring out.
So, I mean, he's smart enough to put the suit together to apply to Oscorp, but he can't see a camera. His spider sense doesn't tell him that there's a camera.
If you remember, and I know that I just keep comparing it to Civil War, but that's exactly kind of what happened with Tony Stark. He was somehow being caught with a security camera when he was swinging around town. And then I think Tony Stark was just smart enough to kind of put two and two together and somehow figure out that was Peter Parker behind the mask. I think it's supposed to be kind of the same thing here. My question is more, it's just so odd that Norman Osborn, because in the second episode, it's such a big deal because what he tells Peter Parker at the beginning is, meet me when you get into the building. And then when Peter Parker keeps on trying to meet with Norman Osborn, they're like, there's no way he told you to do that. He's way too busy. But yet somehow in the end of the first episode, he's not busy enough to go meet with Aunt May and give Peter Parker the job firsthand. So
it might be mental manipulation, like just trying to root whether or not this kid has what it takes to get into the industry.
And if he knew that he was Spider-Man, I would have understood, but he didn't. So it was just strange to me.
Maybe more will be revealed. Yeah. So rather than boring you with a bunch of traditional like Spider-Man history that people probably know already, I thought it'd be more entertaining, at least for myself, to get your response on some of the cheesiest stuff that they've done since the 60s, right?
Okay, yeah.
The 70s, particularly, were very wild when it came to Spider-Man. Peter had his own vehicle. It was called the Spider-Mobile.
I know. Yeah, I remember
But
hearing
bonus
about
points if you could tell me what its name was in Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh, it was in Across the Spider-Verse?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
It was Peter Parker.
That's like Peter Porker, the pig Spider-Man.
It was the car that like three of the other Spider-Mans were all in as they were chasing him down when he was on the run.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Spider-Man has teamed up with, one of these is fake, so see if you can spot it. Spider-Man has teamed up with Morgan Freeman. He's hosted the Prom for Grease, the Grease cast, only the second musical to be adapted into comics at that time. In the election in 2008, Spider-Man, the election had Colbert versus Obama, where Colbert won the popular vote. And the last one is Spider-Man teamed up with the SNL live cast in 1978, Belushi, Aykroyd. They face off against the Silver Surfer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they all sound pretty believable, don't they?
What was the first one again?
Okay, Spider-Man has teamed up with Morgan Freeman.
I'll go with that one.
He has. In the electric slide, I think that was early in Morgan Freeman's career. He was in a lot of Spider-Man, apparently. It was actually the Grease one is the fake. Colbert was a big part of that Obama thing. In fact, I think he saves Obama's life. Spider-Man does. And then the SNL one, I don't think they can reprint that issue anymore because of just copyright issues with them not being the same ownership.
That is the strangest thing.
Yeah.
You're right. There have been some wacky stuff. I know that
Doc Ock almost married Aunt May at one point in the Spider-Man world. And in the Japanese version of Spider-Man, Takuya Yamashiro, his catchphrase is, "I am the emissary of hell, and I shall fight the great evil for the fate of all spiders."
That's his catchphrase,
not for the fate of all man, the fate of all spiders. Yeah.
I know that Peter Parker has been the most successful Marvel person. Like, he's brought in, like, it was in 1999 for $7 million. I think Marvel bought the price for it, and he's just made billions since. He's literally the most successful Marvel character.
Yeah, unless you're talking about on Broadway. Turn Off the Dark. I mean, I think that is the most that they've ever lost on stage.
Yeah,
that any play
which is funny because I know that it did break some records pun intended, break some records a little bit like when it was first released, but then afterwards, yeah, it
They
just
had 3 different endings. They had, like, 3 different versions of the show. I think one of them was where, like, there was another girl who was trying to get with Spider-Man, and she ends the play, like, I didn't see it, but this is what I've read, is she ascends to heaven realizing he's not gonna choose her, and he just runs away with Mary Jane. Yeah. And also Mary Jane and Spider-Man, they played out a whole orchestrated wedding in 1987 in Shea Stadium with Stan Lee there to be officiating the wedding to kind of celebrate the fact that it was actually happening in the comics. They
Yeah.
dressed someone up as Spider-Man and someone up as Mary Jane. Yeah, it's a crazy world. I think Peter Porker is probably a lot of people's favorites.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think John Mulaney kind of kills the role so much
Well, it
that
didn't
people are
start with
for
him though, right? It was around before. It was in
Yes,
the
but
70s.
but people know him mostly from the Spider-Verse.
John Mulaney or Peter Porker?
Both.
The other versions of, because that was obviously a parody comic to
Yeah.
Spider-Man. Do you know any of the other names?
No.
There's Captain Americat. There's Goose Rider as opposed to Ghost Rider. And then do you want to guess what Mary Jane's name is?
What, Mary Jane's name?
Yes. It's still Mary Jane, but the last name is Water Buffalo. Mary Jane Water Buffalo.
So he wants to get a guy with a water buffalo.
Yes, because he's a pig.
And that's okay. Yeah, that's a little bit too crazy for me. All right. Anyways, going back to the show though, should I give my overall rating?
Yeah, because I was about to go into reception. So,
Yeah,
sure.
I would give it a 7 out of 10. At this point, I think that there's more room to grow, but I have hope that the series is going to get better, especially once we get Charlie Cox. I hope he's in it longer than he was in Echo.
Do you really think they're going to make a show called Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man and just have Daredevil overrun it?
I mean, Daredevil was only in Echo for 1 minute, and he was in the
He'll
posters.
be lucky. He did the entire his entire lines while he was on the cast of She-Hulk.
I know.
That he wasn't on She-Hulk for very long. So how long could he have possibly done lines for? I don't know. He has a 77 on Metacritic. Did you say what your ultimate rating is?
7 out of 10.
Okay, so it's 77 on Metacritic. You agree with the critics. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes as far as critic score as well. But on a user score base, it has a 4.9 and a 63% audience score, a 6.4 on IMDb. It's crazy the difference. I think that there is a certain amount of fandom right now who is like, this is not what we like to say. Either they're saying that it's a copy of everything they've seen before, it's not original enough, or they don't like the castings, which is kind of ridiculous, or the animation style, which is there's more credence to that. I can understand people. I completely never watched an episode of Dexter's Laboratory because I hated the animation.
I think that it was really, had they gone Tom Hiddleston,
Tom Hiddleston. Had they gone
something.
Tom Hiddleston to voice Peter Parker, I would have tuned in.
I meant Tom Holland.
Yeah.
I think people probably would have been more receptive towards it.
Yeah. I mean, he's older, though, than even the guy that's playing the Spider-Man now, isn't he? Isn't he like 31?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I just found it more funny that, like, yes, he's 14 years old in this, so they're skewing towards the younger audience, but so was technically Tom Welling in the first Smallville episode. He was supposed to be 14 and he was 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
That's how they started off the series. It was a fun time back in the early 2000s.
That was the first introduction of the Flash, right?
Yeah.
In that episode.
And it's funny because you talk about mentors. The Flash with the last Batman movie in that multiverse where they kept on trying to bring in new people to show up at the very end to be his mentor. And it was just all the different iterations of Batman. It's kind of very similar to Spider-Man. They've always had a kind of a symbiosis between the two of them. Thanks for listening, unless you have anything else you want to put.
No.
We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.